Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Corey Cisco. I am a coordinator senior at the design school here. I am advisor for the graduate programs. I will help you through your time of applying and then all the way through graduation. We're very excited to have you all here. We are discussing the Master of Landscape Architecture program and Urban Design program that we have. We have landscape architecture faculty here that will be joining us, and we'll go through some introductions as well. So like I said, my name's Corey Cisco. We also have Christy Brown, who is my colleague. She is also an advisor. I'm taking this webinar on, but just so you know that Christy Brown is a part of the team as well. And then we also have Joe Ewan, who is the program head. I'm an associate professor of landscape architecture. We have Paul Caseo, who has a PhD, and he is also an associate director and the program coordinator for the urban design program. We also have Ching-Wen Chen, who has a PhD, and she also is an assistant director of landscape architecture. Then we have Nicholas Samofsky, who has a PhD as well, and he is an instructor in the landscape architecture program. And welcome all. And then I'm going to pass this off to whoever is taking on this slide.
I think I'm going to lead off. Corey, thanks for the introduction. As Corey said, I'm Joe Ewan. I'm the landscape architecture program head. And I teach courses, technical courses, occasionally some studios, and then courses that have kind of focused on the Arizona or arid landscape. I'm going to do a brief introduction of the program and the curriculum, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues to kind of talk about specific studios that have occurred recently and research opportunities that are available across the program. On this first slide, which is just from a recent review we had, which was a studio that had taken place in Hawaii. We were able to bring reviewers from Hawaii to ASU and review the final work. But at the bottom there, that's kind of an abbreviated mission of the landscape architecture program, which our focus is on sustainability and other 21st century challenges. And those are realized through the design of healthy, equitable, safe, and resilient environments. And that's something our faculty have recently updated, and I think is a good characterization of the focus of our curriculum and faculty, that it really does revolve around the ideas of how do we advance ideas of urban sustainability relative to the landscape. It also goes on to say the program facilitates positive change and that we are preparing students for professional practice. And I think that's an acknowledgement that the majority of our students, first and foremost, have plans to enter the profession. It also includes advanced study. We have a number of students that go on to either pursue a PhD or maybe it might be a concurrent master's, but some continued study. And then ultimately, our aspiration is that we're helping create the next leaders in landscape architecture to kind of continue to advance the profession. Some news in that last line there is that our MLA degree received STEM designation this spring in sustainability studies, which I think goes on to just kind of further reinforce where our program focuses. Next. And so within the landscape architecture program, we have undergraduate options in Bachelor's of Science in Landscape Architecture, and then our graduate programs include the Masters of Landscape Architecture. We also have a Masters of Urban Design, which we've kind of just recently, Paul's taken the leadership in that degree, and we're developing certificates and other degree options in that area. And then I think it's also important to realize that we participate in a shared PhD program, but really the key contributors are the landscape architecture faculty, that they really do the heavy lifting in that. And I think we're kind of lucky to have a robust enough faculty that we are able to participate actively in that program. Next image. And so just to give you an idea, these are the full-time faculty. And so we have, I describe it as a good, healthy forest of faculty. And so if you have a background in ecology, you know that a kind of even age stand isn't ideal, that you want a kind of breadth of faculty. And so we have a number of senior members. Ken Brooks, who is a former associate dean at the school, is on the landscape architecture faculty and actually directs the PhD program. Ching Wen, who will be speaking tonight. Professor Ted Cook is emeritus, but he had been here for about 30 plus years and still is actually involved in the program. Paul Cosio, who will be speaking later tonight, myself. Rebecca Fish-Ewan teaches courses in history and then design studios. Elise Hargrove and Christian Kelly are clinical assistant professors, and so they have a special relationship to practice, but then also contribute. And then Laura Martins and Nick, who's speaking tonight, are instructors. The other thing I'll point out and brag about our faculty a little bit is this is a group really committed to quality education. And so Ching-Wen Chen was recognized this year by the Arizona ASLA as educator of the outstanding educator of the year. It's kind of amazing that the person that precedes her is Paul Cosio, who was the 2019 outstanding educator of the year. And then also in 2019, there is a third-party organization called Design Intelligence, that looks at programs in architecture, interior design, and landscape architecture. And their last rankings recognized Christian Kelly and myself as outstanding or aspirational instructors in landscape architecture. And so I think it's a good indicator of the quality of education and the commitment of the types of folks we have on the faculty. All right, next. And then in case you're not from metropolitan Phoenix and haven't had the opportunity to visit Tempe, I wanted to put one image in here of the context. And so ASU is in Tempe, which is in the Sonoran Desert, considered one of the most biologically diverse deserts in the world. We're in a metropolitan area that includes Phoenix, the largest city of about, I think, close to 5 million people. If you haven't been here, you know, that view, I think, probably illustrates that it doesn't look like a desert. We really are kind of in an urban oasis. You can see up in the upper left is where the ASU campus is. Tempe is a pretty dynamic and up and coming city. You can see in the foreground, there's a new transit center that has a green roof on the transit building, new light rail system that's expanding, going through metropolitan Phoenix. And then the beginnings of this kind of mid and high rise architecture that kind of, as we're starting to see cities like Tempe become a little bit more dense. Next. The other kind of real asset I think about the context that we're in is Phoenix is within the top 10 largest cities, Metro Phoenix of the United States. And we have a really robust professional community. And so Steve Martino is a landscape architect who I think is pretty uniformly recognized internationally for the work he's done in the Southwest United States. But then we're also lucky that we have large multidisciplinary firms. We have lots of municipal opportunities for landscape architects. I think there's more than 23 cities in Metro Phoenix, and that they all rely on the university to kind of fill professional opportunities in parks departments, planning departments, streets departments. and then a pretty talented group of pure landscape architecture firms. And the really nice thing about that is this kind of cache of people that we rely on to serve as adjunct faculty and kind of teach specialty courses in construction or horticulture. They serve as people that come in and do desk crits or jurors. And so we're really lucky that we have this strong professional community that we have a really strong relationship with. Next image. And so that kind of feeds one of the other benefits to our context is there are required internships in the MLA program, which we think is certainly one of the strengths. And with the large enough metropolitan area, we have got a lot of opportunities in metropolitan Phoenix, if that's where you would like to stay. But we also have many of our students want to go abroad, and so they either have a desire to return to their country of origin, or maybe they just want to go to a country they haven't been to before. And we've been fairly successful in being able to place students in international internship opportunities. And so I just included an image from the firm Turinscape, which is in Beijing, China. And we've had several landscape architecture students in the last couple of years complete internships at that firm, which I think is probably one of the more internationally recognized firms in the world right now. Next. And then one other real asset is we have actually a really active ASLA student organization. Their kind of focus is in both the fall and spring, they host a number of both social events, but then also professional advancement events. And those include guest lectures. This is an example of a sketch crawl that we have every year in the spring to kick off World Landscape Architecture Month. And so we've been lucky where we're able to have leaders in the urban sketching community from all over the world kind of come and visit with us and give a guest lecture, lead a sketch crawl. And the image is Jim Richards. That's, I think, from 2 years ago. And it's a really nice event where we kind of bring together professional community members. It's a networking opportunity, but then also students from all across the degree programs that we offer. I think other guests we had Chip Sullivan recently, we've had Richard Alomar, and so they really are kind of the who's who in that subculture of design. Next image. And then last, I've got two more, just to make you aware that we do have, we're really lucky to have really strong summer study abroad programs. And these are offered consistently. And I should put an asterisk because of the recent pandemic, we weren't able to offer our programs in summer 2019. But the university is kind of moving forward optimistically that by summer 20, we think we might be in better shape. And so hopefully we'll return to a little closer to kind of normalcy. But this is one offered by Elise Hargrove that's focused on Mediterranean cities and landscapes. You can see the cities that she visits. And this is one that's really focused on one kind of expanding your perspective. Many of these places have arid or semi-arid climate, so there's definitely some kind of relationship back to Tempe. But then also the ability to develop your skills in kind of seeing and reading the landscape. Next. And then the other one is equally a great trip. It goes to Rome, Venice, and Paris, and is led by Paul Cosio, who's here with us tonight. And then also a colleague from interior design, which is a really interesting combination. I think one of the things that the feedback I've gotten about that trip is there aren't very many opportunities that you hear landscape architect and design professionals talk about the intersection of the indoor and outdoor environment. And I think it's a really interesting area. And then I think the other thing is that you can see by the itinerary, they go to certainly some of the more important precedents in design history. And so just having in-person exposures to those, I think is from what students tell me, life-changing experience. Next. And then just to say a little bit about the curriculum, it is a studio-based curriculum. And so really the core of each semester is about the studio experience, which is 5 credits. That's the majority of your meeting time during the week. And then it's supported by other courses that are in history, technology, theory, research methods, and that those are all kind of synced up to help support the studio experience. And then the title of the side, Service Learning Studios, I think is really representative of our faculty efforts, is to not really do hypothetical studios. It's really nice that in addition to the kind of curricular objectives, that the studios really focus on working with communities. And so I think I mentioned the studio that students were able to do in Hawaii. They were able to travel there several times and kind of meet with communities and work on a real world landscape architecture problem that affected people's lives. And the nice thing about many of these studios is that they're changing the profession while students are still in school. They're being realized as projects. They're kind of influencing the way communities think about their landscapes and what they're asking for. And so I think that's really one of the nice elements and added benefits of the curriculum. The other thing I'll just say about the kind of 3 tracks is in the MLA is we do have a 3-year track. That is for students that do not have a design background. And so if somebody was an English major and discovered landscape architecture late, that would probably be the most appropriate track. We have a 2-year track, and that is for someone who has a BSLA or a BLA, so they've got completed an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture. And then just recently we launched the 2.5-year track. And so the idea there is allied professions like architects, planners, folks that have spatial training and design really don't fit into the 3-year track perfectly, and they don't fit into the 2-year track perfectly because there are some proficiency courses that they need. And so we've kind of tailored a track for them. And I think we have some of our first students joining us this spring, which will be exciting. As we're launching this, we're having it have a spring start. And so it is nice because it reduces the time to degree by an entire semester or a whole semester of tuition. And I think we're going to explore other options of maybe in the future it could have a fall or spring start, but initially we're looking at a spring launch for that 2.5-year track. Next image. And I'm going to pass this off to Professor Ching-Wen Chen, who actually led this particular studio here.
Thank you, Joe, and thank Corey. So as Joe mentioned, we have service learning studio, and this is one of example I led last fall. And we work with a local charter school in South Phoenix that is primarily serving minority and economically distressed students. And we look into the campus. You can imagine it was the concrete, mostly concrete, and no, not much landscaping. So we integrate how the native plants and the hydrological system can help to deal with the urban heat island effects, the flooding issues, and also provide environmental education opportunities. And so the students were able to engage with the community. So again, the community engagement is a core value for those service learning projects. And we are honored to be able to earn the second prize for the category on the site demonstration project for EPA's Campus Rainworks Challenge. And also this year, it's part of the Arizona State ASLA Student Community Service Honor Award. And I also want to mention as a program, there were a couple of award-winning projects, including the Hawaii studio we led in 2016-17, and with Professor Cosio here too. Together, the project also won the international competition, Make Hawaii Awesome, and also the Hawaii Chapter ASLA Award. Next, please. So from now we are going to present a few research that have been, established in the program, and I'm going to focusing on the Hydrogia lab that I am co-leading, and Professor Cosio and Nicholas. Professor Smilaski will talk about their research as well. So there's green roof and laboratory that's headed by Professor Cosio, and there's a laboratory on top of our buildings right now. And we have other design experiment that we work with other institutions and municipalities and ASUs. So I'm going to talk about more of how the green infrastructure design and process and landscape performance research through the Hydrogia lab. Next. So Hydrogia lab, I'm co-leading this, got the funding from the ASU. And my focus is really integrating my own research interest in green infrastructure, how that can be applied to build a more resilient community and ultimately to address the climate justice. Next, please. So the climate justice design is the ones I construct this idea, and that is to incorporate the social vulnerability, ecological vulnerability, and the technological vulnerability together to identify the hotspots for the climate justice, the vulnerable communities who are going to be suffer most from the climate justice hazards. So this type of work is derived from the environmental justice research while I was doing a postdoctoral research with University of Michigan, and kind of expanded that concept and to look at how climate justice, when we have those aggravated impacts, who will be suffer most, and then how we can use planning, design, interventions to help to make more resilient communities and more sustainable cities. And my research really looking at the gap now. There is a rural and the urban community. There's a gap of distribution of those resources, and also how people perceive their risks can be different from the actual risks, and how the design interventions through working with the community can really address climate justice issues. Next, please. So now I'm going to have up for Professor Cosio.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Hi, everyone. It's Paul here. Very grateful for you to be at the webinar today. I'm excited to share with you a little more of the work that our great landscape architecture faculty does. So this is the Central Arizona Phoenix Long-Term Ecological Research Project, we shortened it to CAP-LTR for the abbreviations. And this is a 20-year National Science Foundation funded project. And we have a lot of our faculty that are engaged in this particular project. And the project is actually split into 8 different teams, and we are really integrated very well into the urban design team. So we have Elise Hargrove, Dr. Cheng, myself, Christian Kelly, and Dr. Smolowski are all represented in terms of faculty in landscape architecture that's really engaged with how we can support agencies, government institutions that are contributing to both resilient and sustainable urban ecological infrastructure, also known as green infrastructure. This is, and actually we have a really great partnership with the Hydro GI Lab, and we partner a lot on a lot of different projects. Here was a project led by the Hydro GI Lab of Orange Mall, which is a biodetention basin on campus at ASU that is overflowing at this point. We had about 2 inches of rain in 24 hours, but in most cases it works pretty well. And so we're really engaged with not only to integrate science and evidence into designs that we make to have a more sustainable and resilient region, but then also on the backside really to also facilitate the research that's needed to actually improve these designs. And so that's some of the research that's happening here. Next slide. So kind of one of the things that's new for CAP is that this was started in 2016, the urban design team. And so actually it was started really with foundations in landscape architecture in terms of thinking about how you basically, take the best science, the best evidence, and actually integrate it into design. And so what we do is through this team, and there's lots of other members of our team that represent ecology, hydrologists, social scientists. It's a really integrated team. I think there's probably 20 people on this one team, planners. We actually partner with local agencies, governments, nonprofits, and what we do is it's called co-production. So we take the science, we work very closely with our partners, and then produce plans and designs for green infrastructure. And then we're also in the process of on the backside, monitoring that and understanding kind of the benefits and the drawbacks from those particular designs. Next slide. And so we have 8 different projects that we're working on in the Valley. And I'm going to take you through a couple of these. Some of the ones that our faculty are really engaged with are in particular the Phoenix Zoo and the LID Durango campus. That's also the Hydro GI Lab that's sort of leading that effort in partnership with CAP. Next slide. And they are located throughout the Valley, pretty much on either side of the Salt River and in the central parts of the Phoenix metro area. Next slide. And Dr. Cheng had talked about this earlier. This is Pede Academy. This is CAP is also involved in this particular project. And actually there's multiple partners that are really doing this. There's also a project called Healthy Urban Environments that we're also involved with. And this is really coming together in terms of a large effort at ASU to really provide capacity within this charter school for communities of color and underrepresented communities to really take action on creating healthier environments for, in this case, children, but really thinking about this as a larger effort for more communities and other folks. And so with many of the projects I'm going to run through now, we've had students aligned with many of these projects and able to either do, in this case, there was a studio involved with this, which Dr. Cheng talked about a little bit earlier, or sometimes there's student worker positions or even just volunteering at workshops and other things that we have with these community partners. Next slide. Another project is Edison East Lake Redevelopment. This is in downtown Phoenix. Christian Kelly actually was on a team with myself and some other urban climatologists to come up with design principles for shade. And so we actually have, I think, 13 different principles that can be used for shade. And we're working very closely with the scientists to develop these ideas. And we do this both on the heat side, the water side, and the ecology side. And this heat action planning guide is something that's available online that you can download to look at. And we've had a key part in creating that action guide. Next slide. Another kind of key way in which we work is we are working very closely with the city of Tempe on their resilience to extreme heat. We've been working with them since 2017, and we plan on continuing this type of work. And so there's lots of opportunities to participate in community workshops. We're working very much in an equity approach to this and a people-centered approach, really thinking about the front lines of heat and who are the most vulnerable people, and really coming up with both design site scale solutions and then also larger ways of placement, prioritizing placement of cooling infrastructure within the city. Next slide. And then finally, we're also engaged in what's called Rio Reimagined. This is reimagining 58 miles of the Salt River around creating an urban ecological civic spine for the valley. You know, how can we Salt River and work with communities, cities and tribal communities to re-envision this space and create a continuous 58 miles of open space and a higher functioning ecology than what's happening right now. As part of that, one of the projects that we're doing that I will hit it off to Nick for is this West Mesa Cool Islands neighborhood. It's sort of there's a larger Rio Reimagined project, and then there's sort of smaller embedded projects along with this. So I'll hand it off to Nick. Next slide.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Cosio. Appreciate everybody coming tonight. Really, we enjoy talking about these things. We're so excited to be able to share some of the great things that we're doing here at Arizona State University in the landscape architecture program. As part of that Rio Reimagined and effort, one of the things that we're working on is this West Mesa River Community Heat Action Project, which we've recently named a new Cooler Island Project, Cool Island Projects. In this project, we're looking at the Mesa community along the Rio area, so the Salt River, and we're looking at disadvantaged communities that potentially have really high heat issues, right? So we're looking at how heat is affecting and influencing these citizens and the environment, the culture, socioeconomic statuses of these areas. And in doing so, the goal is to work with all of the stakeholders in not only Mesa, but several other stakeholders to educate through citizen science and some what we'd almost call crowdsourcing engagement. We'd like to educate people about the benefits of shade and how shade can actually cause the environment to cool. And there's something called natural cooling, and trees, for an example, offer that shade really, really well. And so what we're doing is we are inventorying trees. We're looking at communities with the inevitable goal to do some planting down the road and make actual physical change, not only with helping the communities understand the importance of these types of things, but be able to actually plant and help these communities be more equitable, sort of what Dr. Cheng was talking about earlier with social justice and justice planning. So this is a really neat project where we get to work with a very diverse community. It's very close to here with ASU. One of the things that's neat about this project as well, we are working with the University City Exchange, which is a group here on campus that with a lot of these projects works with these stakeholders. So if you are interested in obviously sustainability, landscape architecture, resiliency, adaptability, citizen science, these are the types of projects that you can engage with us. Next slide. So quickly, a little bit of the research that I complete, but also more so in the teaching. I'm sort of, I don't want to say this, but I'm kind of like one of the de facto technologists in the group, and I'm a huge nerd, and I love technology. I love something called geographic information systems. It's this analytical cartography and mapping that can help planners and designers, landscape architects, make sense of what's happening in the world. It's sort of some of the magic behind the scenes. And so as part of this, what I try to do is, and I assist with these research projects in the different classes and studios, is bringing some of the innovative technology into the classroom, but the studios, but also into projects. Not to say that everybody that you've already heard from, we all love technology, don't get me wrong, but augmented reality, building information modeling, cognitive mapping, environmental perception. How do we interact with the environment? What kind of technologies can we use? These are some of the things that I try to bring in. I actively, some of the classes that you would be looking at potentially either as an elective or as part of your core curriculum would be some geographic information systems for environmental planning. We also offer some design application software classes. So if you need to brush up on, say, some of your digital design skills, say in Photoshop or AutoCAD or three-dimensional modeling software or GIS, that's something that I help to work with. Additionally, one of the things that we're really primed to do here in the desert with the Bureau of Land Management, which is a large government agency that manages and plans a lot of the land around here, is something called visual resource management, something that I try to bring into third-year studios, which is also part correspondingly to MLA students like yourselves. If you what visual resource management is it's the concept of, we always talk about resources, and usually it's things like oil and gas and wind and these things that produce energy, right? But one of the things that's really important is the visual aspects of the environment, and how do we impact as human beings the natural environment to build what we need. Things like renewable energies, big, solar farms and wind turbines, for an example, while they produce really great things, potentially could ruin really nice landscapes. And so this concept of visual acuity, what we see in the landscape being an actual resource, we don't want to just chop down the land, right? We want to preserve what we've got. So I try to bring a little bit of a spatial approach and a technology approach. And so my door is always open for all the students. I have a lot of students that always kind of come in, and maybe they're working in one of these other professors' studios, and they have an AutoCAD question, or they've got a GIS question, or they need to find some data to help their research. That's kind of where I jump in. And so I love working with students like yourselves and helping them progress. So yeah, these are some of the things. You may think traditional landscape architecture is only, this small bubble, but the reality is it's a lot larger than that. And it's in a lot of ways hyper-disciplined. And if any of the things on the left side of your screen look interesting, these are sort of the, peripheral edge topics that you're going to learn in a program like landscape architecture at Arizona State. Next slide. So I think I need to pass the baton.
So I'll just jump in. And so this is just to acknowledge some of our recent graduates and this kind of other thing that I think came out in the presentations about this idea and effort to move increasingly towards greater social justice. And so in 2018, Kristen was one of our MLA graduates. She did a project in one of the more economically and environmentally challenged areas in Phoenix. It's kind of south of downtown. And she really kind of brought citizen activism to her graduate studies. And so not only did she propose some solutions to some pretty significant environmental problems, she actually worked with the city to kind of take action. And that's her in the larger image in the background, where she's organized a community tree planting effort that's happening in concert between the community, which was one that felt disenfranchised. And then you can also see there's a City of Phoenix public works person helping there as well too. And so just just an example, this was her capstone or thesis project, which is another aspect of the curriculum, is that your final semester, you get some influence. And so if there's an area that you want to focus on, you can work with LA faculty to help support that focus. Laura Martins, who you might remember, was listed as a faculty member. Laura was in our first graduating class in the MLA in 2011, went on to practice for some pretty well-known firms in the Bay Area, and then a couple years ago returned actually to Phoenix because she wanted to establish her own practice. And so in pretty short order, she's launched her own firm, and then she was recognized in 2019 as a Women in Landscape Architecture Scholar. And then Valerie Ahong, another MLA graduate who now is with the city of Tempe or the city of Mesa, I'm sorry, as a landscape architect. Worked in private practice for a number of years, and then she's also received that similar award. And so I think, you know, we have a bunch of other students I could brag about, and luckily I ran out of screen real estate here. But these are just some recent ones that I think kind of reinforce the fact that the MLA program at ASU is about affecting real change, not waiting for you to graduate and then go start thinking about change, but to actually do it as part of your studies. And then I think the next slide may be where we hand it back to Corey.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Thanks everyone for going into the details on those slides. Always very interesting to hear what you're all up to. So just to wrap this presentation up, for the 6th year in a row, ASU has been deemed the #1 in innovation, which means a whole different amount of things. But in short, it essentially means that there's an incredible amount of research going on at ASU that is really exciting. You heard a bunch that's happening in landscape architecture right now. We have a very high number of patents that ASU does own and is participating in, and just a lot of interdisciplinary work that is going on that is incredibly exciting. A lot of that is happening at the design school, and it would be great for you all to join us in this community that is continuously doing really exciting things, just as all the landscape architecture faculty described. And the application process, just a quick summary here. So there's 2 applications that is required for students interested in applying. So the first one is a typical application that you would complete for other universities. It's your personal information, previous institutions, and this is where you would send your transcripts. If you are just applying and you have your unofficial transcripts on hand, you can actually just upload those, and that'll actually speed up the review process in terms of processing the application. So I highly suggest you do that. Then for those international students, there is an English proficiency requirement. So there are a few tests that will meet these requirements. So if you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to ask. I'll include our email on the next slide. These programs that we described do not require the GRE, which is really great. So you don't have to worry about that necessarily. And then there is a slide room application. That is what the admission committee take a closer look at. So this will include your portfolio. So for the 2-year applicants, this will be a portfolio that you comprise with your professional experience, but then your academic projects as well. But for the 3+ and the 2+, or for the 3-year and the 2+ applications, that'll look a little bit different. They're not necessarily looking for you to have a traditional landscape architecture portfolio, but rather that if you're applying for 2+, including some maybe urban planning, more urban design or architecture focused projects, or just design projects I've worked on in the past. But for the 3-year, they're really looking for creative hobbies, to see that you have some sort of eye for design, something along those lines. If you have a hobby in painting, drawing, that sort of thing, that's what they're looking for there. And then there is a statement of purpose, which is 500 words, fairly short in terms of an essay, and then email addresses for 2 recommenders. So you'll actually input the name and email address for those recommenders. They can be professional, academic, whatever you see fit. And then the Slideroom portal will actually send an email and ask for the recommendation, so you don't have to collect any physical letters or anything like that. Our application opens September 15th, which means it is open right now. Priority deadline to apply is January 15th, which means you do still have some time, but if you want to get your application reviewed fairly quickly, I suggest you get them in. You'll get your admission decision within a month or so. After the priority deadline is when we send out funding decisions. So if you do get any sort of funding with your offer, that is when you'll get that after that date. And then this is Christy and I's contact information, my personal email and hers, and then our office numbers. If you want to ensure that your email gets answered quickly, I suggest designgrad@asu.edu. We both have access, so if one's out of the office or busy, the other can grab it and answer your question quickly. We're pretty quick when it comes to answering email, so you won't have to wait too long. And then when we're not in COVID-19 season, we are located in the College of Design North, room 162. If you do want to request a meeting with us, please just email us. We can set up something in order to go over your questions that you might have. And then please like and follow us on all social media. We're most active on Instagram right now, and you'll be able to, keep up with all of us in terms of what we're up to right now. And then now we're at the question portion of this presentation. We're a little bit over on time, but we can take a few questions if people have them. Go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A. Take advantage of the time that we have with the landscape architecture faculty. If you have any specific questions, we're happy to address them here.
Hey, Christy, while we're seeing if we're going to get any questions, I thought I'd just say something about the 3-year MLA and the portfolio. That's a question that seems I get on a regular basis.
Yeah, go for it.
And so I think sometimes that, depending on what your undergraduate studies was in, sometimes that's a daunting word, is you have to submit a portfolio. And I think the trap people fall into sometimes is thinking they have to include landscape architecture or landscape design in their portfolio submission because they're applying to the MLA. The faculty don't expect applicants to the 3-year MLA to have a background in landscape design. And so really it's an option for you to just help us get to know you better. We've had a huge range of creative work submitted. We had a swimwear designer one time submit a bunch of images of models in the swimwear that they had designed. I recall one year we had somebody who had a engineering background, but was really passionate about working on cars, submitted some cars he had retrofitted and customized. If you're coming from a writing or literature background, including written works, poetry would be a totally appropriate thing to start to submit. It's pretty common. We see photography submissions, which kind of certainly tell, the type of subject matter, and your ability to kind of frame a picture tells us something about you. So, don't anyone have too much anxiety about that. I think it's something that should be kind of enjoyable, and you should look at it as a way to kind of communicate information about yourself, not a source of stress. Because I think the faculty are very, very kind of generous and understanding that we're not expecting someone with a non-design undergrad to have a big, deep background in design.
Yes, thanks for that clarification, Joe. We have 2 questions here. So is the 2021 programs on campus or online? So they're on-campus programs as of now. COVID-19 did inspire ASU to have a hybrid model that everyone is working under right now. But in terms of fall 2021, we don't necessarily know what that's going to look like. But technically, they're on-campus programs, and they're not fully online. And then we have one more question here. So maybe one of the landscape architecture faculty can answer this one. So can an undergrad student of architecture take the landscape graduate program and still pursue a career in traditional architecture and or still take the licensing exams for architecture?
I'll jump in on that one and then let my colleagues add if they want to. And so certainly we've had a number of, it's actually not uncommon that we have students that are pursuing either dual MArch and MLA, or maybe have a undergrad architecture degree and then go on to get an MLA. And so, yes, I can tell you we have kind of proof points. We've had students that have gotten licensed in both. And so the kind of key is that you have an accredited degree. And then there's an internship period based on whatever state or country that you might be working in that determines when you're eligible to take the test. But if you have an accredited architecture degree, an accredited landscape architecture degree, and then you work under licensed practitioners for 2 to 3 years, you would be set to pursue both or one test. The other thing I'll just add is we have a number of examples of students who have done an undergrad landscape architecture degree and then gone on to get an MArch. And what I've seen repeatedly is they end up being some of the strongest architects in their cohort because they have this kind of much more facility with site design, site planning. They have a kind of added skill base. And so I think it would be a really great idea for someone, even if you're focused on architecture, but you already have a degree, if you want to continue your studies in the allied field like landscape architecture, I think it would be no question value added.
Awesome. And then we have one more question, which maybe Nick can answer. So this is from Christopher. He said, I will be a 3-year applicant as I have a background in computer science. I am curious about opportunities where my technical background may be an asset in the landscape architecture program at ASU.
Yeah, and I'd say the same thing. Anybody can jump in, but as we progress forward and we have paradigm shifts with technology, computer sci is applicable in almost every industry profession out there. I was mentioning geographic information sciences and systems earlier. The mapping system that is kind of behind the scenes with a lot of the analysis. That system, which when you see maps, or perhaps in the COVID-19 season, you've seen Johns Hopkins dashboards, for an example, the background behind that is actually computer science. It's programming. It's Python. It's IT infrastructure. And so I think there's a natural connection there. If you can think programmatically, I think it's going to be an additional asset for you to be a landscape architect. You may need to focus a little bit more on hand drawing skills and some of the traditional stuff for landscape architecture, but with a strong background in computer science, the software side, the 3D, the digital side, I think would come very easily for you. And so I think it would be a huge asset. And I would guarantee that we would welcome with open arms anybody with a computer science background, because another thing would be math, right? So there's an inherent amount of logic and math that can be utilized in architecture. And when we plan out open spaces, those all work together. So I think it's a natural area where it comes together. And a lot of this, just last thing I'll say, I mean, as we move towards a society that has more to do with things like augmented reality and drones and autonomous vehicles, when we start to design around these new environments, understanding the computer science behind it, I think is going to be very valuable. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I think it works. It really does.
I'll chime in for a second too, because we actually have shifted some of our classes. So I used to teach a class called Green Urbanism, and we've transformed it into a class called Smart City Sustainability and the Environment. And so, we're actually connected. We're a core course for the National Science Foundation traineeship program at ASU, which is in smart cities. And so we are heavily connected into the smart city space at ASU. And so there's lots of opportunities, as Nick described, but then also even with the smart city work, it's starting to become a larger portion of what landscape architects do, just to reiterate that.
I can chime in is those skill sets definitely also help with research. You can do much in-depth analytical analysis, which I found that people who actually know the math and programming can do well in the research to how to analyze the data in a different way. So I actually appreciate that. I also want to add to the distinct profession between architecture and the landscape architecture. And I think our really unique profession is to really understand both the people and the environment and how we work with communities. And so we really see a bigger, bigger lens and bigger scope to see how the community, how the regional and from the big scale to the small size scale works. And architecture tend to look at objects, and also landscape architecture also understand environment, has a strong ecological base, but also understand how people work in the space. There's environmental psychology also plays a critical role in shaping how we design a space. So I see our profession has a strength to really address the systems, issues we are facing right now. So just add to that.
Thanks, everyone. And I think that's all the questions we had. Any concluding thoughts before we say goodbye?
I'll just add that if anyone has questions that come up after, you certainly feel free to contact me if you have questions about the profession or specifically about the curriculum. If you have questions about the application process, Corey and Christy are your kind of key resources. And I think between myself and my colleagues, if you had specific questions about the profession or the MLA curriculum, that we'd be happy to respond back to you.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all. Thanks to all the landscape architecture faculty for joining us too. Really appreciate you taking the time. And thanks to everyone who joined us. We are happy to answer any questions and get you connected with any of these faculty members here. And just thanks again. And I hope you have a great evening or morning or wherever you're tuning in from.